there. So we can start continue talking about it. Gwen, probably just
I think that was a bit of I mean, I knew that there were different divisions. I didn't know that there was like that many specializations. I think that was kind of an interesting thing for me because I started and I'm still in the indie space where I remember like when Alan first like hired me, he kind of just like, all right, so we sold this project to a publisher and I need you to get it done. And I was the only designer on the team, and then there was like no blueprint for what I'm supposed to do. So I did everything from like tools design. To like I did level design, I did data design, I did monetization design, I did everything that was required to ship the game.
Yeah, no, AAA has very many divisions of designers, and people start out junior, usually as a game designer or level integrator, which means your primary job is to just do what the other guy tells you to do. And if you do it well enough, then you do it on your own. But once that happens, once you spend about a year or two within the company, like Ubisoft or any other industry, you actually get to pick your specialization if you're interested in it, and then they will try to drive you towards learning the specialization a lot. It doesn't mean you get stuck into that position, for example. So if you're a combat designer for 1 year, doesn't mean you become a designer for the rest of your life.
Where God of War, like we had specific designers set up to be, okay, these combat designers were taking care of these creatures. These combat designers were taking care of these creatures. So like everyone had a divvy of what creatures were being made, and they would work with the concept artists, they would work with them. Like every single type of designer had their own web of influence, right? So like me as an encounter designer, I worked closely with level design, I worked closely with collision design, you know. The other level, like level designers, they worked with the level artists, they worked with other people, right? I didn't need to worry about level artists that much because that was a few streams away from me.
So we got like this part whereby Syndicate is worked by, the lead studio is like Quebec.
Yes.
And then like for Origin it will be for Origin it is like Montreal. So like the way they do up their coding and stuff like that is very different, and like
share tools among studios.
we do share too, but the integration always like come like maybe in the mid of the production and things like that. So like some of the stuff might not be integrated by then. So they are like maybe just recreating the thing over again. And like sometimes like if you want to simplify this kind of a specific feature, we don't need that such complexity of the tool that it gives. So they end up like redoing it and simplifying it in the process.
So I think for us, even when it comes down to like say UI elements, working on the HQ side, sometimes they will request very specific changes, and this impacts actually a lot of art and design. They're less picky about the code because they don't see it, right? But there was a conversation we had about Japanese colors, and a lot of us were trying to like, the fuck is a Japanese? So apparently everything's color shifted a little bit, and because the market's first, I mean the game's first target was Japan, we were working in collab with them again. They had to send over this special art Bible with the colors calibrated and going like, it's only when we saw it they were like, oh right, so everything's shifted like I mean it's in the Pantone sort of there, but everything's like shifted a bit to the right, like your green's a little bit more blue, your blue can be the darker blue, the lighter blue, your violets are pronounced, your red is not the sharp red, it's like a slightly more violet red. So when they give us examples, then we're like, oh my god, they're right, there is a Japanese color palette.
To touch on the other topic we were going to talk about, what was your testing process like when you were working like that on a live game?
In the earlier days of, which is about 8 years ago, right, plus, of mobile game dev, honestly, it was internal alpha, maybe a closed beta, and then, hey, the game's 80% done, release it to the public. I'm totally serious. And the thing is, for that day and age, it worked. And actually, a lot of the 80% was good enough. I'm talking about like from a commercial POV. Not necessarily you're trying to make the best game that ever was, but more like, is this good enough to make money? Should I change the art? Do I scrap this project? Do I reuse half of it? Which half do I reuse? So 80% was good enough to go onto the App Store, Android, Play Store, whatever it was, right? And the public would literally decide for you whether that was something you continued building or you trashed it.
If our community team is doing any number of work that they should be doing, they're going to have the pulse of the community. And then as designers, other places I've worked at. So I worked at at Cloud Imperium Games for Star Citizen, and Star Citizen had seriously some of the most. As a designer, I would seriously talk to the community every day. Like actually put it in our workflow where we were on Twitch watching people play the latest patch on Star Citizen. As soon as we patched and the patches were live, whether it was our super beta testers and then like our regular beta testers, because we seriously had a group that basically those guys were the ones that got the broken patches always, and we're like, hey guys, this is really broken, can you help us out? And they were like, yeah, sure, give it to us. So on God of War we were doing internal playtests where we had people that have never played the game before, people that don't work for Sony. We had that once every other month for a little bit, but then the last 6 months right before launch, we were doing a playtest once every 2 weeks. So they spent a lot of money on playtesting, and seriously, it was part of the culture at the studio is when we had an internal playtest going, because it took people 3 or 4 days of playtesting to basically beat the game at that point, right? And this is before boss fights were put in and polished and stuff, you know. And if we wanted people to go from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, it took 3.5 days, right? And then we had 5 people in the room watching about 20 testers, and then I could seriously at my desk click a button, it would pull up the streams, and I would select which players I wanted to watch, as well as I had streams for watching the room itself, and I see who was asking questions and stuff. And then the chat within the streams itself, we also had a chat inside that. So whoever's watching the streams can be like, hey, what players should I watch? So like a lot of times people would go into the streams and say, hey, what players are the good ones, what players are the bad ones? So we would always watch the good players and then the bad players. The middle ones we didn't really care about as much. We were looking for more of the extremes so we can kind of make our own kind of line. And a producer, his job when the playtests were going on was to tell us, hey, he knew exactly what work people had done, what levels you worked on, and what encounters and stuff you worked on. So then he'd be like, oh, this player such and such is getting to this stream, player such and such is getting to this one. And he would message the different developers and then tell us which one or which player was at what level or what area of the game. So a few areas that we were struggling on, like, I don't know about this part. As soon as playtesters would hit that part, we're like, all right, it's all playtesters and stuff. I mean, they also had in the streaming software that they had set up, they had it to where we could actually flag while we're watching, like, oh, that's a bug. We would actually click on the stream and say, hey, bug here, and then write a small little description, and then the QA guys would go back and verify all that stuff. So they really integrated the playtest session in with our own development.
Which is one of the questions I was going to get to. So as an indie then, they have way less resources. They have no internal department, for example. They do it themselves.
One of my friends...
Well, like when you say a lack of resources and you're having to do things yourself, I think that's maybe a gap that's missing in some places as well, where you have these external departments running, or even other internal departments running playtests for you, and then they provide you the feedback and can advise you on like how you might want to react to things like that. But I think it's a gap in terms of a learning process for designers, because I think that the ability to run and assess and then figure out how to react to play sessions as a designer is something that is very difficult to learn, and actually can benefit a lot from that hands-on experience in my past experience anyway.
Do you have any times of like one that you failed miserably and you're like, oh yeah, I'm never gonna do this again?
When we launched Zhenkuo 1, everything was pretty much right. We had not done we had a testing audience of like 20, 30 people that we'd get gathered. So for Zhenkuo 2 it was 1,000, because we had the Zhenkuo 1 player base to draw on. But when we first launched Zhenkuo 1, we were pretty much unheard of. Fortunately, we pretty much managed to get everything right, and it launched, except for one thing. I had forgotten that there are safeguards on the Google Cloud server, which was what we were using, to do rate limiting, so that you don't accidentally get overcharged if you do something silly. And I've forgotten that those were in place. So for the first 24 hours, we hit like 3 different types of rate limiting, each of which caused massive like disconnections to our players. And we were getting featured at that stage because it was just on launch. We had Google and Apple features, and a bunch of 1-star reviews because of that connection. And to add to that, China, which has its great firewall, you can't access AppSpot domains, which is Google Cloud's entire infrastructure, from China. So we got a feature on the Apple Store in China, which brought us tons of traffic, all of which couldn't play our game.